guzzling gas, having limousines, creating cities like Atlanta where 99% of the people travel by car. So Americans created the most polluting cities in the world. We don't have that luxury. So we'll have to create cities which are more compact, which are more dense, which are on the back of public transportation, which are based on recycling of water, recycling of waste, and yet have to be extremely livable. And therefore, the challenge for India really is, and India has been an extremely reluctant urbanizer. But to my mind, that's a huge advantage. The huge advantage is that we must move away from sprawling cities, embed our cities with public transportation, and that requires a lot of money in terms of infrastructure. Do really good spatial planning, but also use technology to leapfrog. And the opportunity for India is that it's the only country in the world with 1 billion biometrics. It's the only country in the world with 1 billion mobile. So virtually, you can manage your cities on the back of good mobile telephony and on a real-time basis. The challenge really is for India, to my mind, is that Indians must learn the art of monetization of land values. Urbanization cannot move forward in India till we do not monetize land value. For every bit of infrastructure that we create, we must learn the art of creating value out of it. That's number one. Number two, I think the regulations of municipalities are very outdated. And because they are outdated, there's no concept of special purpose vehicles which will enable you to do that monetization. So every new urbanization process that is done under the 74th Amendment, under a provision called 243Q, which has enabled you to create industrial cities. And to my mind, it's not possible for government to create or do all urbanization in the future. And if government does it, it'll do shoddy urbanization. So the important thing is that it must delegate, decentralize, and allow a much greater level of private sector play in the process of urbanization. And this would necessitate some legislative changes which will enable private sector to pool land, to do their own master planning, to do their own trunk infrastructure, and to be able to monetize land values and create cities of the future. That's one. Number two is, on the existing cities, I think there's a huge challenge about raising revenues by enhancing tariffs. There are cities in India, there's huge civilizational cities like India, like Varanasi, where water rates and electricity bills haven't been raised for the last 2 decades. I mean, you can't run a city till you don't charge market prices. And therefore, people are dying for good services. They want to pay the price, they want cities to be better managed. And therefore, it's necessary that services are provided at the right market prices. So the challenge for India has just begun, and it's important that we do it on the back of good planning, on the back of good legislation, on the back of good technology, on the back of good public transportation, and on the back of good recycling of water and good recycling of waste, which will enable better livability. I'm not touching on creativity, I'm not talking about culture, which are very essential component of great living. But for India right now, is quality of infrastructure, which is critical.
Thank you. And if I could building on a bit of what Amitabh was just saying, so you spoke a lot about the creativity of Tel Aviv and the spirit. How do we make that link from creativity and culture and heritage to the quality of infrastructure, the actual or economic quality, economic development, and what is Tel Aviv doing to make that connection? Sort of how does all of this creativity actually help improve the quality of infrastructure and the quality of the city and its economy?
Well, if I may, actually, it was the reverse. Tel Aviv in the 1980s was on the verge of bankruptcy. The infrastructure was rotten. Nothing worked. The city was in debt. And the decision that the city made, and of course, the young people left. When you formed the family, you would leave, and only really old populations remained in Tel Aviv or lower income populations. And it is the center of the country. I mean, the basic assets are all there. It was just mismanagement of the funding and a lack of investment. And the city made a decision 15 years ago to reinvest in the infrastructure, and essentially, for 5 to 7 years, probably I would say the mayor, who's been mayor for 18 years, was the most hated person in the city because everybody had a grievance with the mayor one way or another. Their road was blocked, the road was open, something wasn't functioning, but he said, guys, patience. It needs patience. It's not a quick win. We have to redo everything. When the infrastructure was improved, when the cities became livable, fun, safe, walkable, people started returning. So the creativity came the other way around. It was always the artistic center of Israel. It was always the cultural center, but there was something about when the city became much more livable that people started returning. And I'll say one thing about the city, because it's so small and it's very walkable, we walk everywhere. And that's really one thing that to me is very apparent, but again, it's a totally different culture. We walk everywhere, and everything happens in the street. I reached the point where I'm about to sell my car. I don't want it. I don't need it. I walk to work. If it's a bit more of a distance, I take a bicycle. We're now introducing a car sharing program. I don't want to have a car. There's no need for me to have a car. Having a car is selfish. I'm taking up the space with one car of so many people or bicycles that could be on the road, and there's no reason to have it. But that's a luxury you can have in a small city. But it's also a luxury you can have when walking on the street is so fun, and knowing that you're going to meet people on the street is so fun, and it's a safe street to walk on. That's when creative people start returning to the cities, and that's what happened in the city of Tel Aviv.
That's great to know. I mean, I'd love to pursue that question, especially about where did all the money come from in the first place to fix the city?
Quite honestly, we started charging what you just said. We started collecting tax. We did a good collection. So the person that wasn't furious about the mayor for opening up his street was furious for the mayor for collecting tax for the first time in an efficient way. But we started collecting. We started giving tickets for parking on the sidewalk. There was a culture of people parking on the sidewalk with complete chaos, and it was known that like after 11 p.m. you can just park on the sidewalk because you're going out to a bar. And no, you'd come home at 2 o'clock in the morning. You'd leave the bar, smack. There was a ticket on your window. So people, there was like I would say it was like gambling. You'd say, okay, I'll leave my car. There are chances of 1 out of 5 that'll be ticketed. So it's worth my while to leave my car on the sidewalk because the fine, I'll deal with it if I'm given a fine for every 5 times I leave my car on the sidewalk. But then when you start getting a fine every time you leave your car on the sidewalk, and we're chasing you with the lawyers to pay your fines, then it took 5 years, it took 7 years. I mean, we're not the fastest people, Israelis, but eventually we get the point. So people realize you can't leave your car on the sidewalk anymore. So when you erase chaos and there's law and order in the street, and you create a very pleasant environment, that's when people, I say, go back to enjoying the city. And most of our taxes, in the case of Israel, we have a different legal system than most places. The city tax is based mainly on businesses. There are a lot of businesses in the city, and that's their main source of income.
Okay, that's great. I love that story, and I think I'm going to use it again. So Anand, if I could turn to you a bit. One of the other things that we've talked, we're here at the Mahindra World City, but we're also, as I said, in the era of deglobalization, as people say, or this economic nationalism. How do these things go together? Or what is your vision for the relevance of globalization in the context of what appear to be a lot of cross currents, a lot of turbulence, a lot of people saying we want less globalization?
One of the reasons I'm very allergic to coming on a panel with Amitabh is he usually leaves you with nothing to say when he's done. And I do agree with a lot of what he says. Two of the points that he stressed on, I'm going to expand on, and that was really about decentralization. That was one of the themes that ran across his comments. And empowerment. He talked about private participation. I don't think he meant the corporate sector in a sense, but it was about empowerment of people. So to go back to your question, Jonathan, it's not so much deglobalization that worries me. I could go on about deglobalization and what the world, according to Trump, might mean. And I think I'll skip that now. I think the real trend we have to watch out for is the death of the megalopolis. That concept, to my mind, has to be put to rest. Somehow, as we went past when we went through the past decades, the model was that the city is what made a country productive. You got enormous gains in productivity when you moved from rural areas to cities. Urbanization is what caused modernity. If you look back, there was no productivity gains for decades and for centuries sometimes in rural cities. It was urbanization that created productivity. And the larger the city became, the more productive you were. Somehow that model is broken. You alluded to it a lot in your opening comments. First of all, keeping up with infrastructure needs is becoming impossible. Keeping up with rural-urban migration is becoming an enormous social problem. And we're not China. We don't run like China where you can flick a switch and tell people you will move in this month from the countryside to the city and back. So rural-urban migration in India is a problem that cannot be sorted out the way China has done. When you look at economically what's happening to cities, frankly speaking, infrastructure itself is breaking down the productivity gains. The Gini coefficient, in fact, has become worse in cities with globalization. So you're getting divisions into ghettos, which are dividing people apart. And the social pressures where people are losing a sense of identity and community is breaking identities apart. So I'm afraid nothing is working. One of the things I wrote about, in fact, in a recent McKinsey publication was that we have to reimagine how India is going to urbanize. And we have to use that concept of decentralization. So rather than imagining the world as a network of megalopolises, New York connected to London, to Tel Aviv, to Paris, and that's what the vision of our world is. I think, first of all, in India, we've got to realize our goal is not to create those kind of urban agglomerations which will match up to the mega cities of the future. We have to decentralize. So what happens to productivity then? Are we going to give that up? Well, that's where I think the death of distance, as Francis Cairncross put it so eloquently, comes to our aid. You don't have to sacrifice productivity anymore. Digital technologies and communication allow you, if you're sitting in a village, using 3D printing technology, you can manufacture automotive parts for my vehicles, which, by the way, Aita and I keep hoping to sell, even though you vowed never to buy a car. I'm hoping we will be able to sell some of them and need some spare parts. But they might be made right in the village where I might need that spare part. Or an artisan might upgrade their output and their products using 3D printing and directly sell to the world or to the other cities in India. So I think we have to challenge the notion that productivity cannot be improved in smaller urban agglomerations. I think Mahindra is putting its money where its mouth is by creating these kinds of smaller agglomerations. Mahindra World City, Jaipur and Chennai are experiments in that direction. And I want to end with the idea of community. I know Amitabh said he didn't have enough time to talk about that, but he said that's important. We've learned the hard way. Anita and Sangeeta will remember when we put up Mahindra World City, Chennai. To be honest, we did it as if we were playing SimCity, you know, a kind of game that we were playing, and here's your work area, here's your living area, here's the hospital, and it was just a Lego set of things that we had put together. We forgot about how do you build community? What are the intangibles you build? How do you get people to come in and build a nightlife? It's not by just plotting things on a map. And I would dare say Sangeeta's goal right now is to build those. So what's as important for her as building a hospital? It's creating a marathon, which occurs in Mahindra World City, Chennai, to draw people together. Creating a signature artistic event. Those are the kinds of things that we have to do, which will restore a sense of community and identity. And those are best done in smaller agglomerations. You had a chart, I think, item of citizen to citizen was your last item. The most critical. One of the investments I've made personally is in a small startup called Local Circles here, which is about citizen-to-citizen contact to bring transparency and accountability in governance. That, combined with smaller agglomerations and the restoration of community, plus technology that allows you to be global and productive, I think that's where the future of cities lie. So may 1,000 cities bloom is what I say.
Thank you. Very well put. And I wanted to build on one of the things you said, is how to reimagine the city.
Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/ETNow, and don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at ETNowLive. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/user/ETNow.